This is an unsanctioned broadcast, just chatter. I did feel to bring out my sound bowl and the books that I'm currently reading, and I think what I'm doing is going to talk through them. For what, I'm not sure. Let's see, what's the intention for today? What is Spirit's purpose? Love. Okay, that's cool. And what respect? It's creative respect. What does that mean? It means that we make it ourselves. Anything else? Be still. Okay, so when I say be still, hi everybody, welcome. What I mean is mentally. And we're so accustomed to continual thought that not thinking seems wrong. And yet, it's difficult to perceive without influence if all you're hearing is, okay, hold on, let's see. I started talking and then I had a notification. Actually, I'm going to end this and nope, feels like to continue. Good golly. In stillness, you have the opportunity to take in information that you wouldn't think to take in. And depending on your familiarity with your headspace, that might not make very much sense. So when you are coordinating thoughts and interpreting meanings, it's kind of like you have a bag of stuff. And it's all the things that you've read, you've absorbed, you've been exposed to, your parents said and you heard but didn't hear, like everything is there. And so you're often looking through what you think is and then using your little bag to understand. Your bag doesn't have everything. Nobody's bag does. What you can do is develop a relationship with the bag, a relationship with what is in that interpretation process to come to, as best you can, the ground. And still, it's not it. Hello, everybody. Welcome. So what I'm talking about today, I think, are books, and Spirit also wanted to talk about love and how it is creative, and from the standpoint of, from the standpoint, I said of how you make it, and then I started to talk about the ways that, we miss the ways that, stillness. I talked about what it means to be still. And to me, it means kind of like a mental fast where you withdraw enough from the interpretations that you would more routinely apply to make space to perhaps synthesize a new understanding or to receive it. Let's see. I started to think, okay, it feels like to go this direction, but you can train yourself to allow a more direct experience of inspiration. I work with people who are spiritually inclined. To me, spirituality is basically the allowance of the non-physical world. It's sort of saying like, yeah, and there's more. Intuition occurs to people differently. Usually, people who are very intuitive. I pulled out a box to do this as my new light. It's nice, right? People who are very intuitive don't know they're intuitive, as they've always been intuitive, and they can't fathom another way of being. And it takes sometimes someone from the outside saying like, see? What? How is this? I wonder if it's the block. I have one of these blocks on it. It does feel rather warm. Come on. That means I'll have 2 of them in my house, and let's flip through these lights. You don't know how intuitive you are, because generally it like drops in and goes into production. It's so cool. You can, over time, come to allow a more direct experience of it, and you cultivate this Who would have guessed I would be out here talking about this kind of stuff? Because honestly, 7 years ago, I would have been like, cool story, bro. But here I am. Oh my God. I can't even. Hold on. There's gotta stay here. I wonder if it's the power current in the cord. It does feel like that brick is rather hot. Hey everybody, sorry. Great, now I'll have 2 of these light things. And none of them will work. Okay. There we are. Let's see. So a direct experience of intuition. You can come to hear and see things. The more time you spend with your headspace, the more you'll come to recognize what's yours and what's not yours. Again, at first that might sound absurd. Of course, they're all your thoughts. They're happening in your head. But let's say that you're in a room with somebody who's listening to music. That has a vibration to it. You'll feel it. Like if it's really loud, if somebody has the bass on really loud, like you'll feel it. Similarly, you'll feel other thoughts, but your mind interprets them into language. You can also come to pay attention to the pictures that occur in your head. Why would you want to do this? Let's zoom out, and why would you want to do that? Man, sometimes there's some really good information that can help you look in love. Fear, to me, the mind takes really great notes on what hurts and what doesn't work. And then it spends, a good amount of your life being like, don't ever allow that or do that. You can't be that. You can't, whatever. Often inhibiting what would be natural expression or movement because of one incident. Like I told the story on my Instagram story a few months ago about how I saw a shooting. For a long time, every time I heard a loud kind of like banging noise, my body responded as if it was that. Similarly, if you've been in a situation where someone lied to you, or you weren't able to fully express yourself, or you made a choice that sucked, or you'll respond just like I did to the loud noises to life as if they're that kind of threat again. And in that excitation, while your nervous system is all crazy, it's very unlikely that you're able to take in what is. Why is that important? Well, that's essential. Like, think of it like doing surgery. The better lighting, the more precise you can be. When you're responding to the information of life, the more clarity that there is, the greater your decision making. Clarity is kind of a two-way street. We want to be able to see what's externally clearly, but we also want to have a good idea of ourselves. And so a good idea of yourself is not kind of like this ego-laden construct so much as it is like Shaylee requires so much time outside. Shaylee really enjoys, and those are things that can move. I'm on a live thing. They're not static, but in general, knowing who you are, not who you think you should be, not how much sleep they need, not what kind of snacks they like what actually feels good to you, can help you then while you're navigating sort of that interface of like details outside, details inside. Is this a good choice for me? Human design is a astrologically based tool I really like. It is not the end all be all. It can become kind of its own beast, but it does have an interesting, it supposes that people break out into these different types, and then within the types, some of the types have consistent decision-making apparatus or authority, and some have several. But authority in human design is basically like, how does my whole vehicle make choices? We've been trained in our culture to think you make choices with your head. But like I was saying earlier, the basket of items you have next to you, all the things that you can think about, and the ways that you can think about them, they aren't all it. And so it's not essentially the best, although it's important to include in your decision making. Like, it's not saying like, oh, ignore all the things that are reasonable, ignore all the stuff that makes sense. It's just allow that there is a little bit more to the equation. For example, human design says that I have, based on my time, date, and location of birth, and you can look yours up if you go to mybodygraph.com, and it takes a little Googling to get around it, or you can hire me or somebody else who's familiar with it. I've been doing it since 2018 with myself and clients. I have sacral authority, which basically means that my body feels like I have, oh girl, hey, if you're there, I really love you and I miss you. That means that my body has energy for something or it doesn't. I want to do it, I feel like I want to do it, or I don't. And that's different than like, oh, I don't want to do the chores. It's more like there's life force to participate with this person, there's life force to pursue this goal, or there's not, meaning like my head has generated it, my head thinks it's a good idea. The more that you experiment with your authority, the more that, and I do really like that about human design, he does frame it all as like experiment, not like own this right now. I do appreciate that. Experiment, you'll find that perhaps, as I did, that you really can, like, I use it to navigate my day. I make choices based on like, do I go here first? Should I take this call? Don't, based on the way that my body responds. And I've experimented, which means that I've ignored it. What I found in that data set is that when I ignore it and do what Shaylee wants, my head, it doesn't work. It doesn't work as well. You know, sometimes I'll still override myself, but in general, I don't and won't, because there does seem to be, like, my overall body does seem to be able to take in information and synthesize it way better than my head. And again, it doesn't mean that I should exclude that entirely. It seems really important. I learned this one kind of like the long and hard way. It seems really important to remember that, okay, well, we've all sort of agreed to this reality and this landscape, and okay, these are the responsibilities that I've agreed to, and these are the things that I'm tending to, whether or not, like, I forget where I was going. I just had a thought. The light didn't go out. It was the brick the whole time. Okay. So we were talking about headspace, and I was saying you can come to really like learn it differently. You can pay attention to it and use the information that you get from it to make decisions. So what I was saying is, like, your thinking generally originates from fear and a desire to control, and depending on how much bullshit you've been through and how much T is in your PTSD, like, the harder it will be to look past that and really interpret things accurately without the like constant looming threat. And if you haven't had that kind of experience, God bless you. Like, my content might not be for you, but that's what I've lived through, and that's what I'm coming out of, and that's what I hope to contribute to conversation of, like, if it's been wily in there, like, it's okay, you'll get out. You can get out. So making a decision in love, I started by saying, like, oh, what are we doing here? We're talking about love. And, like, how? Like, oh, how is creative? And how is it creative? Like, oh, okay, well, you make it. Well, how do you make it? Well, you make it in your choices. And as that relates to this idea of non-physical information can help you see where your narrative, the story that you're telling about what isn't the whole thing. Honey, oh my God. Here's an experiment that's coming to me right now for you to try. think of a problem area for you, and I want you to write out what you think the problem is. Like, just speak it freely. Don't edit yourself. Don't pretend there are any viewers. Don't try to sound smart or cool or balanced or reasonable. Like, just say it freely. Like, this is what it is, without judgment. Then tuck that away and give yourself 4 days of not thinking about it. I'd imagine that in revisiting the topic in 4 days, you'll notice not how crazy you are, but kind of how crazy you are. Because there are other ways to see what's happening, but you really buy in so strongly to your interpretation that you won't. I need to remember to turn off notifications before I sit down here. You'll buy into your story so completely that you'll almost create a maze you can't get out of. I love children's literature. If you've been with me a little while, you know that I'm forever reading some kind of young adult book. I'm trying to get great at that as a medium. And I'm reading now on my Kindle, actually, which I don't generally prefer, but it's been quite nice. The last few books I've read on my Kindle, I do prefer a paper copy, but for now it's fine. But in any case, I'm reading The Mysterious Benedict Society, which was a recommendation someone gave me. And one of the main characters has like this inclination toward puzzle solving. And basically taking information and shaking it out of his first interpretation and looking for an underlying pattern. And that, to me, is what metaphysics is. It's like, okay, mystics. I posted something by Carl Jung the other day that said mystics are sensitive to archetypes, something like that. And that, to me, is like what metaphysics is. It's the patterns, it's the archetypes. Mysticism is like, you see the drama on the stage, you're living it. But sometimes you can sit back in the audience and be like, oh, okay, like, I see, like, you're representing the father figure here. That ties back to here. And so I'm living out this pattern, this interpretation. We're so imprintable. Oh my God, humans are so funny. You are imprinted with information in your formative years. And it just is kind of like this loop that you'll live out. And that's all the work everybody's doing when they're healing. You know, we're healing these imprints that were made with less information than was helpful. Imprints about love, about money, about ideas of ourselves, about whatever. And you just kind of live out the same story over and over, whether you're the victim or the outcast or the incompetent, like whatever it is. And again, like, it doesn't feel like to caveat that if you're still here, you're probably included in somewhat. Hello, everybody. Welcome, new people. Welcome. What I'm talking about today is using intuition to establish new alternative meanings to what's going on in such a way that it creates more space or opportunity for you to make a choice out of the pattern. So what I'm talking about are these templates. Your thinking corresponds with the templates. It's so funny. Thinking at first is descriptive. I made a mistake. Then it's prescriptive. I make mistakes. And so you have this feedback loop where you're describing what's happening, but what's happening is because you're describing it. And again, in all my work, I can't tell you enough. Like, don't take my word for it. Like, get out there, see for yourself. What's it look like to you? But I would be behooved to find out that it didn't work, and that you might hold on to some identifier. I'm not confident. This is hard for me. I have trouble with this, and just continuously live it out through your attachment to that idea. As you attach to the idea, you look for it, whether you mean to or not, because it's just sort of like we have these Post-it notes on a cork board, kind of like a serial killer. And all day long we're collecting information to affirm our Post-its because we need to know what reality is. We need a base so we feel safe to be here. But nobody knows shit. Nobody knows shit. You think you know stuff, but we're one of like, and I say this a lot in my work as well, there are no solids. This is not solid. This is not, none of this is solid. It occurs to us at solid, at this level of perception. There are no straight lines. Like, our whole actual reality is not at all what we think upon it. And yet those things exist, like if I want to make something, I'm kind of interested if it's a straight line or not. And yet, like, in nature, they don't occur, and like, the table is solid enough for me to put my little bag of chocolates on it, but it's not it's being able to allow that it is and it isn't simultaneously. That is, to me, like what the spiritual path yields, which is the middle way, where you come to be a part of the on-stage action. You're a player in the drama, but that's not you, though. Like, it is and it isn't. We are the actors, not the characters. God is living out all of these different potentials, all these different possibilities for what I don't know. And to me, God is life. And how interesting, how incredibly fascinating that it's expanding in these ways. Like, modern living is absurd and so fascinating. And like I was saying with some of the other stuff, there's normalization to these things that you lose the miraculousness of everyday life and being, how extraordinary everything is, because it's just every day. A long time ago, I was on, it's not that long ago, but Roy Edwards, not related, had a podcast, and we did a show. And after it, when we were doing our solo recap, he told the story about Jesus. And I probably said this in my work a lot already. But people were sitting around, and some of his disciples were there, and the villagers were like, "Oh my God, did you see what this guy did? It was some miracle." And his disciples were like, just Jesus being Jesus, like a normalization. And that's cartoonish and anecdotal, but the point is basically, like, even with yourself, there are things that you will do so naturally and so well that they escape recognition. You're not counting them in your asset column because they just are. So much of you is functioning at any given time perfectly, absolutely perfectly. But because there's no error, because it doesn't click off any of the wrong, things, you're not sitting with you thinking like, oh, look at my digestion, or look at, I've been able to lift my arm with just the intention or the reach. Like, there's so much that's occurring at a given time. Okay, hey everybody, welcome. I'm talking today about opening to intuition, navigating your headspace differently, and being open to have new interpretations of kind of like the world around you, so that you can make choices out of fear patterns. And I mean out of, like, beyond. So, like, you got the loop, your pattern, your template, living out helplessness, living out lack, living out whatever it is, and your thinking affirms the loop. And so when you allow intuition to make a different choice or to provide information, you can kind of get a little space outside of it and see something you hadn't seen before. And I could go on quite a bit about intuition development if that would be interesting to anyone. It's not really, it's development. Yeah, it's development. It's just a sense refinement. So, like, you would train your palate to taste, or you would train your ear for music, or whatever it is. Like, if you have a child, so I imagine you would learn to attune yourself to their needs. Like, it's just attunement. That's basically what it is. It's intentional exposure and a willingness. And so with intuition, oh my God, there's so much information, and you can, I've said this before, like, expand that to even interpret others. And I also said earlier, it feels like to revisit, not all the thoughts you have are yours. And I've said that to people, and they're like, of course they're my thoughts. Well, okay, sure. Like, do you? I don't know. Maybe they are. But at a very basic level, your thoughts are built off of your early exposure to language and thought structure. what your parents were talking about, how they were talking about it, what the world around you was focusing on, how they were focusing on it, the way that they were acting toward it. Like, all of that creates thinking. But it's not yours. It's theirs. You can come to own it more consciously over time by studying the limits of thinking or looking at, like self-reflection or question. But even that isn't, it's like, it's such, let's see if I could do it. Okay, so let's say like you're thinking of a color. You would be sourcing some kind of color that you've seen. Because if you've been blind, you can't think of a color. You don't know what that is. So it's like with words, let's see, does that make sense? It's not like you. The collective experience is subtle. Like, as I got really quiet and really sat back and made space to listen, I'd see pictures and hear things I knew were not mine. I didn't know those people. I didn't have that information. I use it with clients consciously. Another example of kind of like feeling and seeing, and like maybe I'm opening a door for you to validate the experience that you're having, or somebody else's maybe around you that are telling you like, oh, I feel this, and you're like, no, because you don't feel it. With sensitivity, to me, it's kind of like we're sitting in this room, somebody has extra sensitive hearing, they say there's something going on down the street. If you don't have extra sensitive hearing, you're like, yo, you crazy. Just because you can't perceive it doesn't mean they aren't. And that's with like a lot of these non-physical sensitivities. Like, just because someone else can't validate it doesn't mean that it's not. But you do have to be mindful. You're still interpreting through your little bag of tricks and through your own sort of like identity, and often through your wound. And interpreting through your wound looks like, again, kind of like, where might there be a threat or some kind of like attempt at control. It's not just pure experience, it's tainted. And so whether you're taking in information from what you look at, you see through your eyes, or if you're taking in information that you're perceiving, if you're not hip to where you have, like, you really have to work to come to a place of like purity, so that it's not all like, I guess all of the information ultimately is pointing back to what you could or want to know, but just being thoughtful and acting on the information that you get externally or internally, so that you're not hurting yourself or others, I had a boyfriend a while ago who was atheist, and he had spent a good deal of time with ethics and exploring kind of like what, like how to live well. And he came to, his first rule was like, don't hurt anybody. And then his second rule was, I own me. And it's so crazy, like years later, trucking down the little spiritual, non-physical, existential, multidimensional path, I came to the same things. Like, those are the only things I can really be sure of, which is like, regardless of what I'm doing, I want to make sure that I'm conscious of the impact that I'm having on other people, and as well as myself. Like, if you hurt yourself, you're hurting ultimately the people around you, because you're not separate from those systems. So like, not hurt anybody. And then I own me, which basically means like, I am a sovereign being, and I am entitled to have my own experience, and I am entitled to make my own decisions. And that opens up a whole other door of interpretation as far as like the world around us. But let's see, I've been out here for a while. Anything else? No, that's it for today. I'm gonna bowl a little. Yeah, we'll do this a little bit. I noticed in one of my playbacks the bowl can be kind of loud. So while I wrap up, let's allow this to kind of clear Actually, no, rather than what we're taking away, let's make it about what we're emphasizing. So let it be about emphasizing purity of feeling and seeing. And feels like an intention to love, comma, be loved, comma, and enjoy love. That's nice. That's really nice. Okay, so I'm glad we fixed the light problem forever and ever. Amen. Does anyone have anything before I close out today? Again, this is like a little bit more off prompt. This is part of this is a freestanding one. I'm not sure. I guess I'll put it on YouTube. I don't know what I'll call it. What will I call it? Freestanding. And so I need to summarize. So in summary, what we talked about today was basically what I talked about today was how one can make choices in and toward greater love, which to me is sort of like a more expansive experience, and that's in contrast to fear, by allowing for intuition and non-physical information to assist you in seeing and making choices beyond patterns that were imprinted in fear. And why you wouldn't be doing that naturally is because your thinking aligns with the template, the pattern. And I'm sorry to say, but like your most convincing narratives are really invisible to you. And I suggested an experiment to make them visible would be to write out kind of like just write a story, kind of like a State of the Union about one of the problems you think you have, and write it forcefully, like without apology. Like, don't try to make it sound like, you make sense, or just say it like this is what it is, and like put it down, and then give yourself space to not think about it for a little while, and see if when you come back to it, you can see you in the story more. And sometimes it's helpful to do thought experiments where you're like, well, what would person like this see or say, and it doesn't have to be somebody, you could use somebody who's very handy at it and be like, well, what would Jen see in this situation? Or what would a really confident person see, or how would they behave? Like, look through other eyes. Ray Dalio, his book Principles, hey girl, pulled you in on that one. Ray Dalio is a hedge fund guy, and he has a book called Principles, and I love it. I really love it. I think I'm done, nearly done. It's longer, but he kind of outlines how he interacts with information to minimize error. And he's been doing it. He kind of took that methodology that he initially developed around making trades in the financial market to like how to manage his the personnel in his business. And then it's like, oh, every area of his life, he's like, oh man, well, you want to have a way, kind of like I was saying, to a system of working with information that allows for your biases, so that you can come to, as best you can, like the information that you need to make a good choice. It's not about being right. It's about, having like a good read on what is. It might be different for you, but for me, it took a bunch of ego work to be wrong. Like, it took a lot of work to let it be okay that I was wrong, because so much of how I valued myself was like how smart I was. Well, okay. It's not that smart to not be able, like, to withhold yourself from information that makes you wrong. Like, let me see it. What is it? Let me see it. I am more than willing to be wrong if it means that I can make a better choice. Like, I'm not in it for me, I'm in it for what it is. Okay, thank you everybody for coming out. If you're watching this on Instagram, other broadcasts are on youtube.com/@ShayleeEdwards. If you're watching on YouTube, this is broadcast live on Instagram, Shaylee__Edwards. I've got several channels right now. Intergalactic Hotline is my personal lab notes channel. That's just sort of like, honestly, it's a lot of jokes. And then it's whatever I think to like share from my own processing. And then I have Shaylee Edwards Art now, and that story has interesting things I find interesting are beautiful. And then the page shares artists that I'm working with, their work. Super exciting to support them and help them establish a greater footprint. Some of them are already well on their way there, but it's just cool to be a part of that. You're welcome to buy work if you're interested in starting your own art collection. You don't need thousands and thousands of dollars. If you haven't bought art before, it's such a cool experience. It's like this is mine, and like it's meaningful. Like selling art is kind of like watching people fall in love. You know, it's a great piece, but like it might not be for you. Like there's something special inside of it when it's yours and you know that it's yours. And again, it could be in a room full of incredible work, but like it's just that one, and I can't really say why or what. So if you ever want to see a bunch of options, no pressure. I'm happy to curate them for you. I also work with clients one-to-one. That format is quite fun. It's a lot of channeling, and it's breakthrough facilitation, and then there is an energy healing component. And then I will build out structures as needed per the work, and a structure could be a spreadsheet that says like, pay attention to these things. Or it could be just kind of like some images that you get to take home with you. Whatever it is, you know, I've got a toolbox at this point. Okay, thank you again for being out in the room today, and have a beautiful weekend. Something else, there's something else. Don't be afraid to try something new. I don't know who that's for. Anything else? No, that's it. Oh, actually, I should start doing these. Like, I love Marvel so much. Oh my God. And I love it without knowing I loved it without knowing anything about it. So a couple years ago, I watched all the X-Men in release order. And what I was saying to myself, and when I told other people, is like, oh, I'm doing this for educational purposes. Like, there's something here. And then I watched all of the Marvel films, nearly all, and the shows. I skipped some shows in release order last year. And I just fucking love the characters. Like, oh my God. But I wasn't like a comic book anything. And then while I was working on an art project the other day, I played this Stan Lee documentary in the background. And it all came together, because what he did that like I thought I saw but didn't really get until like I heard it verbalized was he made it about the human and not about the mask. You know, not about the superhero, but about the person who was the superhero. And like, yeah, man, yeah. What was my point? Oh, maybe I should make these like Marvel films where it's like if you think it's over, but if you wait a little bit more, there's something good. I don't know if that counts, but I'm a big Captain America fan. I too am a big Captain American fan. Thank you so much for coming, everybody. Have a great day.